So again, just to start us off, I want to thank you, the panelists and those in attendance, our students, non-students, but somehow GMU community. Thank you for attending this session. This is Converging Approaches to Sustainable Resilience, TIDES 2020 virtual demo. And this is part of the breakout session on nutrition, public health, and integrated cooking. And for our discussion session, the panel is going to discuss on the theme, Sustainable Food for All. So welcome again. Our panelists, if you have any questions, for those in attendance, please feel free to share your questions in the chat, and our panelists will answer them before we leave today. But I want to go ahead and introduce our panelists. We are actually having a team of really experienced researchers and practitioners, Caitlyn Hughes, Dr. Kerri LaCharite, and Dr. Mary Whitney. And to just give you an idea of who they are, Dr. LaCharite is an assistant professor in the Department of Nutrition and Food Studies at George Mason University. She writes and teaches about sustainable food systems, food and culture, urban agriculture, and the effects of agriculture-based learning on eating behaviors. Dr. LaCharite's work draws on her various roles in the food system, including serving on Pittsburgh's Food Policy Council and Fairfax Food Council. Dr. LaCharite holds a doctorate in sustainable education from Prescott College. So welcome, Dr. LaCharite. And then Caitlyn Hughes is the Executive Director of Solar Cookers International. Solar Cookers International mission is to improve human and environmental health by supporting the expansion of effective carbon-free solar cooking in world regions of greatest need. Solar Cookers International leads through advocacy, research, and strengthening the capacity of the global solar cooking movement. Solar Cookers International has worked with communities in North America, Central America, South America, the Caribbean, Europe, Asia, Africa, amongst others. Welcome, Caitlyn. And our third panelist is Dr. Mary Whitney. Dr. Whitney has spent the last 15 years in environmental education, working primarily with citizens, teachers, and their students. As a sustainability director for Chatham's campuses, she leads collaboration on sustainability practices in the university, works to help Chatham meet its carbon neutrality goals, and teaches environmental studies and civic engagement. Dr. Whitney is one of the founders of the Green Education Movement, a professional support and education organization for environmental education practitioners in Pittsburgh. She holds a doctorate in sustainability education from Prescott College. Welcome, Dr. Whitney. So we do have a list of questions that we're going to use to guide the discussion. And, feel free to answer these questions whichever way you want and in the direction that you want it to go. You are the experts here, so I just want to put that out there. And again, if we have questions, please provide the questions in the chat and we'll answer them before we leave today. So I want to start by asking about your perspectives on what a sustainable food and nutrition system looks like, and think about different settings, different communities, and what does that entail? So I can start with, I'll start with Dr. LaCharite.
Okay, so I'm like, this one I feel very comfortable with. Yeah. So to kind of give us some background too, because I know we have some newer students involved, so the United Nations in 1987 put out the Brundtland Report, and that's where our understanding of sustainability comes from. And how it was defined was the development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the future. But really what's key in terms of that report, it outlines economics, equity, and the environment, all three of these things, these three stools. So we really need to address that. So when we're thinking about a sustainable food system or a sustainable nutrition system, really these kind of three legs of that stool are kind of key. And there's so many different definitions of sustainability that are out there that sometimes it gets kind of overlooked. And so I think in this framework, that food production, of course, and the supply chain would look different in different places. But ultimately, they need to address the root problems of food security, equity. They need to deal with production in terms of, they need to make growing food, making food economically viable. And we need to think about the outcomes, the environmental outcomes. And so it will look different if it's in an arid climate versus a forest, but we can just kind of put that whole framework over that we need to include that.
Thank you. Is there anything our other panelists, Dr. Whitney, would like to add, or Caitlyn?
I think I'll let Kerri take that one.
All right.
I'm the practitioner.
Thank you. It's really good to know that, as you mentioned, Dr. LaCharite, that sustainability will look different in different places and depending on the local context. So thinking of this year's theme, it so happens that on Friday is the World Food Day. So this is quite timely. Right. So thinking of the World Food Day and the theme being grow, nourish, sustain together, right? How would you recommend that we are going to promote? How would you promote this to the different communities that we work with? Knowing that sustainability means different things. So if we are in Fairfax versus in Sacramento, or in the US versus in rural Kenya, Guatemala, these may mean different things. How do we get to promote this in a way that makes sense to individuals and communities that we're working in these different settings? And this does not have to go to Dr. LaCharite. It could go to the practitioners that could help us with this.
Right. So how about this? I will give a quick thing on theoretical, because I can do that. I have the, and then I'm going to let the practitioners what actually this should mean. So, I'm an educator. I do a lot of what I do is in the classroom. And what I think is key in these kind of 4 words, the grow, the nourish, the sustain together, I think, we need to think about the system as a whole. And I know Dr. Whitney can talk a lot about systems thinking as well. And so, so ultimately we need to kind of move out of individual behaviors and into more systems thinking in terms around problems. So, we can't fix the eating habits of one person, but how do we address everybody? And I think that's where both Mary's work and Caitlyn's work really, I think, speak volumes.
Thank you. So Caitlyn or Mary, do you want to take this?
Well, I can explain since you mentioned about the systems. So I'm the sustainability director for Chatham University. So my job is to make our university function more sustainably. And a huge part of that is, of course, the carbon footprint. And that's how I got into solar cooking. Most cooking in our part of the world happens with natural gas or electricity, and vast implications for that. So I've been trying to have conversations about using solar thermal energy for years. And it's really hard to sell because people think it's not possible. So I became a sort of solar cooking fan as I was trying to have these conversations about, of course the sun is powerful enough to do this. So I actually started using solar cooking as the intro to these bigger ideas about renewable energy that I need people to think about. So it's kind of it's taking the individual idea of I can make this and getting people, once you see the power of that, you see how hot something can get just with some glass. I think it makes it easier to have a conversation about, and we could expand this up to be building heat. If I can boil water in a little glass pot just by sitting it outside all day, I think we could probably keep our buildings warm and not have to frack. So that's kind of how I became a fan of solar cooking and a practitioner of it. was as a way of addressing this bigger system problem.
Thank you. Caitlyn, do you have anything to add to that?
Sure, definitely. And I just want to say thank you for this opportunity and for organizing this discussion. I'm honored to be here with all of you talking about this really important topic. And thank you for understanding that cooking is a really important part of food sustainability as well, if and how it can be prepared. And I think there's a lot of different ways. You know, I definitely hear you in terms of sustainability. It does look very different and can look very different to different people. But I think solar cooking is such a beautiful thing because it's the opportunity to also talk about additional value. So for example, you know, with regards to the term grow, you know, if people are using solar energy to cook their food, then you're not having to say, you know, burn animal waste as fuel, and then you could use that as fertilizer, which then can be used to increase crop yields. And so there's a lot of additional values that really come to light, I think, on the individual, the household, the community, the country, and then also the global scale as well. That's one of the things Solar Cookers International has tried to do is we've tried to quantify the benefits, both in terms of health, environment, and economics as a way to encourage more investment in solar cooking, which I think can really create more sustainability for the sector as a whole also. And I can put a link to those in the chat if that's all right.
Yeah, that would be great. And thank you. And I was so happy to hear you making that connection between solar cooking and then food production and in a sustainable manner. I work in Kenya, and those are some of the things we talk about: food security and teaching women about use of animal manure. What are some of the sustainable methods of making sure your lands and farms are actually, you have that soil fertility to produce foods. And I hadn't thought about solar cooking that way to make that linkage. Now I have another message to tell them next time when we're talking about this, why we need to think about solar cooking. So thank you.
Can I just go off, and I hope I'm not going to take it into a completely different direction. Yeah. But you know, when we think about the sustainable food systems, I mean, we have to address all of it from consumption to production, and there are issues all the way along. And so it doesn't quite seem like, you know, why is, you know, solar cooking, you know, in the same bag as, you know, thinking about land use or deforestation. But really, ultimately, how we feed ourselves, like, it determines the fate of humanity. Maybe not necessarily today, but, you know, in the future. And so, you know, they are connected. When we think about, you know, agriculture, like, agriculture uses 50% of the habitable Earth's surface. And that 77% of that is in domesticated animal production. And so, you know, but then that goes to meat, and then we, you know, so, and that feeds into the whole, what are we eating? How are we cooking? And, you know, is the problem really the problem? Is the way I, you know, go with the whole systems thinking. And that, you know, we look at that smoke inhalation causes from cooking and heating causes more deaths than malaria and HIV combined.
Wow. When you say that way, the enormity of it really hits us all, right? And I think part of the problem may be that when you look at issues being addressed, so we know there's the issue of sustainability and building a sustainable system, but when you see a lot of things, interventions, policies coming along, they are all in these bits and pieces in their own little boxes that sometimes we fail, for the most part, we fail to make those connections, not only just as individuals and practitioners, but also at the policy level, is how do we tie it all together? So I hear you.
Right.
My next question is about what are the pressing concerns? So when you look at the food system and you look at low-income communities or low-income nations, what do you think then? And think about the system thinking and what is possible. What are the most pressing concerns that we need to be paying attention to build that sustainable system? And I do believe it's going to be different. What we may be of concern in the US may be different from what is of the primary concern in Guatemala. But what do you think what are those tenets that we have to think about if you're going to work with communities and talk about building sustainable systems?
I mean, I know Caitlyn, I'm hoping Caitlyn can say something to this, but, when we think about, I work mostly domestically, but when we think about globally, most of the world's poor have been traditionally small farm holders. And, these are people, and especially, these small farm holders, the burden goes heavily on women, not just for cooking, but for agriculture. I know that, Caitlyn's work has gone into many different countries. And so we really have an opportunity, I think, with that population.
Thank you. Caitlyn, do you want to add something there?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there needs to be this addressing these challenges at all different levels. And so that's one of the things that Solar Cookers International works to do is, we go to the United Nations Climate Conference. So we're advocating with, global country leaders, and we're trying to encourage them to include solar cooking in their nationally determined contributions or their official plans in terms of how to address climate change, because I think this is something that can affect everybody. And, we also go to the high level political forum, which is normally in person in New York, but this year is digital, because solar cooking does positively impact all 17 sustainable development goals. So, we're working on that level to make sure that country leaders recognize this and know this is a solution, because some just haven't heard of it before. And then it's that light bulb moment where they're like, this is exactly what my people need. Let's figure out how to make it happen. But then we also work with, local women's groups in Tanzania, because I think for the actual, implementation and behavior change and all those things, it really needs to come from within communities, because the helicopter aid model is not sustainable. So in the lines of sustainability, both in terms of, the environment and financially, but also in terms of that sustained impact with and for and by communities. It really needs to come from people who are cooking the same foods and speaking the same language and living in the same climate and experiencing all those different things, because it's, as with many social movements, it's so much more successful when you've got that community feel to it. So I think that change is important on all levels, and that's something that, we work to facilitate those connections to drive that.
How do you think, going on those same lines, how do you think solar energy, renewable energy has been received in the US or in various populations around the world? What has been your experience?
This one I can definitely talk to. Yeah. So renewable energy in the United States anyway is almost entirely focused on wind power, and solar thermal power is completely ignored. There is, and it's not just in the United States, Canada too. Canada had a very robust solar thermal research and development program until about 5 years ago, and their government changed, and with a lot of pressure from fossil fuel extractive companies, they dropped their program as well. And so you just really have a hard time talking about the power of this very simple technology, although it's some of the most tried and true solar technology. One of the things that I've found is that people don't realize that solar thermal will actually heat even on a cloudy day. So people are like, if you can see, the solar thermal will work. If it is bright enough for you to see outside, there is still some solar power. Like right now, my stuff that I have out in my backyard here that we were going to talk about earlier, but the day's changing, but it's still warm. It's not up to 180 anymore, but it's still at like 100. And so it's hard to have these conversations with people because the policymakers just literally don't understand it. They think it's only going to work when the sun's shining, like photovoltaic. They don't realize it can be building integrated, and without a developed research and development program as a country, the technology won't be there when we need it to be. Like there's a long history of solar thermal technology production, but with this drop in research money for it, when we do absolutely need it, it's not going to be there. And so we're losing time making all these
so from what you're saying,
back forays to fossil fuels.
Wow. So from what you're saying, it seems like you're saying there's need for research and growing research in that area. There's need for, I think, education and awareness.
Yes.
And at different levels, from the community level, individual, to the policy level, understanding what this is. There needs to be some political will of some sort.
Yes.
What else do you think is needed then to make this happen? If we had those three, do you think this would be, everything would be perfect and everybody would, adopt solar?
I don't see why they wouldn't if there wasn't a lot of pushback from a fossil fuel company. Basically, they get everybody worried. You'll see ads. Sometimes driving down the road, you'll see a billboard. The sun sets, wind stops. It's like cold continues or whatever. That's a big one that you see around Pittsburgh a lot. But what people don't realize is that like energy storage is a technology of its own, of course. And there's a lot of research and development in that can be highly effective. It's just like, I think people have to come to a better understanding of the technological possibilities so that they can then re-advocate for, you don't have to have natural gas to cook. You can actually cook with the sun. Someone says, oh, but it takes so long. I'm like, so does a slow cooker. You plug it in and it takes 6 hours. That's about how long it takes me. It's just... but I do actually think that it's partly, has to come up from the grassroots of people who know how to do solar cooking, and it also needs to come from the example of at the institutional level. Chatham actually has solar thermal hot water that provides hot water for 230 some people. All their hot water needs: showers, kitchens, laundries, a cafe, all of that, restrooms, all of that totally solar. The biggest problem we have is that we were going to put it on every building, and now there's no one to do it. There's no manufacturer. Wow. So even though we are willing to do it and would like to do it, there's nothing to do it with.
Well, Kerri, it seems like we have to step up at GMU then.
We do. We really do.
I was wondering, has your experience been similar when working in global settings? In low-income nations, I know you've worked, Solar ACI works in Kenya, has worked in Central America. What has your experience been?
Yeah, and I just want to share this other link in our chat really quick too, since you're asking about uptake of solar cooking and distribution. So that's one of the things that Solar Cookers International is working on doing, is trying to track where solar cookers are, when, what types, those kinds of things, so that we can, see progress as a sector. And I think it also helps communicate with policymakers. Sometimes we'll meet a country leader at the UN climate conference and they're like, oh, that's an interesting idea. And we're like, no, it's not just an idea, this is actually in practice. And so, able to help share that information and communicate the benefits that way. And I definitely hear what Dr. Whitney is saying, and I think those are definitely valid points. To try and throw out a few silver linings, because I feel like that's what we have to do this year. I've heard anecdotally from a lot of solar cooker manufacturers that their sales have actually gone up a lot this year, which has been interesting. And I think, speaking personally from Sacramento, we've had record high temperatures and we've had, smoke from all the wildfires. And I think that's really bringing urgency and bringing to light the need for solutions like this for everyone around the world. And I think that's making it a lot more tangible and relatable and a lot more real and a lot more urgent. So I think both with the pandemic and with a lot of the climate change that we're seeing, I think solar cooking is an effective solution to both mitigate and address those challenges on all sides. So trying to find a silver lining, but yeah.
There's always a silver lining. I don't know. I sometimes, it's like, you can't be a sustainability director and not be an optimist. You can't.
Exactly. We all love a challenge, which is why
otherwise we'd have all given up. There wouldn't be a sustainability director, so we weren't optimists.
Right. Exactly.
So am I allowed to ask a question myself?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Well, like, so Caitlyn, where, like, who are the biggest consumers of solar energy, or solar cookers, or where do you got, or who are the biggest champions?
That's a great question. So we have a team of global advisors. So we have representatives from all around the world. I think some of the most interesting examples of institutional scale solar cooking, so cooking for thousands of people, we've actually seen in India, which is great because there's such a huge proportion of the population there, and then also a huge opportunity also with how people are accessing cooking. And so we actually organized a world conference in India in 2017. So we were able to bring hundreds of solar cooking practitioners and experts from around the world so that they could see, and we had it at an ashram, and so people could see these, steam systems that are cooking. One was at a hospital, so, the last thing you'd want to be doing is burning a whole bunch of stuff and releasing it into the air around a hospital. And so they have a really great Zamuni Seva Ashram solar steam system that they use for both cooking and also powering their air conditioner. So yeah, pretty neat.
Wow, that is so good to hear. As I hear you, all of you discussing this and what the issues are, it seems like you really need, as part of advocating and building this movement and practices, there's need for strategic partnerships, I believe. Who do you think are your partners when you think about sustainability, whether it's in the solar movement, whether it's in crop production, along the food system, all the different levels? Who are your partners that you feel are really embracing the idea of sustainability and truly engaging in it? And I'll go back to Kerri maybe for that first.
Okay, yeah, of course. So, I mean, I work a lot domestically, and especially at the local level. But I think, especially in thinking about sustainability and resilience, there's not one food system, there's many. And building resilience is about layering those food systems. And so, I believe heavily in food policy councils on a local level. Our soda taxes have come from local policy councils that have then been adapted, or there are even state food policy councils. When we look at other examples like urban ag incentives, tax incentives for people to grow in the city, these all come from a local. And so again, I think Caitlyn mentioned it earlier about, involving the community, having those stakeholders. So it's about pulling together those, who's on a food policy council. It is the food banks and the pantries, the hospitals, the policymakers, the farmers and wholesalers. So it's about bringing together these really interesting stakeholders and to kind of problem solve and to kind of, give ideas. And I have one example, it's not solar cooking, but, I was doing a bunch of, meetings in between the different 4 main institutions in the university system in Virginia. And I was in a small group setting with a sustainability director at UVA and a meat packer. There was some other people in there, but in that meeting, in that small group that broke out, they figured out how to source locally local organic meat for all of their burgers at UVA. Yes, and because they had chefs and the meat packers and the sustainability director, they were like, okay, well, what if we make a blended burger and we put in mushrooms into it? They figured out they needed to taste test it with the students. The students overwhelmingly preferred this than the regular burger. So it's bringing together all of these different stakeholders. And that's more at a Virginia level. I'm sure both of you guys can speak to this at different levels.
Oh, thank you. That's really encouraging. Wow. Have you had similar experiences, Caitlyn or Mary? Is this what you're seeing, that, bring all these different people? Are there some stakeholders that you feel in your work really rise to the top above the others? How do you go about this?
Yeah, I can add. So one of the things that we do is we manage the world's largest online database of solar cooking information, solarcooking.org, and you can actually search by country. So if you wanted to see who's solar cooking in Kenya or who's solar cooking in Brazil, you can go there and you can search, and then we provide contact information if people want to share theirs as well. So then it allows that connections within communities also, and then this database is also translatable within multiple languages. So we're trying to facilitate that platform so that people can connect with each other, and we're not just a funnel for it, but people can create those connections. And yeah, as I said before, I think we're trying to create, top down, bottom up connections to get, the policy and financial support from bigger organizations like the Green Climate Fund, but then also, like I said, you need that local support and desire to make it actually happen.
Mary, do you think there's gonna, and maybe it's happened, but do you think somebody in coal would say, you know what, I do agree with you. I think solar cooking, is a good way to go, make some steps towards that direction.
I don't know. I mean, I suppose it could, right? Like I think the problem is people who make their living doing something one way are not going to want to see the change, even though long term, like it's going to affect their children. Mm-hmm. Just as badly, there's sort of like a little blind spot there.
Yeah.
So I think that you could probably have that conversation with someone who's in coal, but I doubt you could have it with someone in natural gas because most of our cooking is with natural gas, not electricity, right? So but I think one of the biggest co-conspirators, if you will, is actually K-12 education. Like K-12 education is a spot where people are always hungry to learn new things, no matter what they are, because they're all new, they're all young people, they need to learn, but they're also willing to try the things that you might not get someone in a little more solidified way to consider. So a lot of the work that I do actually starts out with a K-12 program, and then from there you can have other conversations.
Yeah.
But like I do more with little kids. That's why my ghost son is so bashed up. I actually let the kids use it because I want them to learn how to do it, but it means none of the hinges stay tight anymore or anything like that. But the children are so into it, and then they'll go tell their parents that they had it, and then I'll actually do a parental session at the same time if there are parents there, or I'll do like a simple children's cooker, and then I'll also have the parents looking at the more technologically advanced stuff so that they can see it. But I think K-12 is actually a huge part of that.
Wow, that's good to know. I want to go back to issues around, what have been some of the examples of what is known as sustainable eating. And I know thinking about solar cooking, when you think about it, even though it could be a difficult sell, but when I think about it, I think I'd say, I'm not spending money once I have it installed or I have it set up. But you think about local foods and organic foods, these are things that we as nutritionists and those who are promoting healthy eating, we encourage people to do. But at the same time, we know that they're quite expensive. And where is that balance where, local producers can still sell and make money, but also consumers, and especially those who are low income, can actually afford these products and the produce that, we are promoting as being the way to go? Where is that balance and that point that we need to reach to make this a good sell and a sweet sell for everybody?
I can start off with that one. So there's a few different things, right? So on an individual level, like we can point to how much waste each family each year wastes, about $400 a year just from your refrigerator, what gets thrown away. So if we recover that waste, but when we think about food on a bigger scale, like we're talking about 30% of all food grown gets thrown away globally. And so in different countries, it's in different places in the food system. So that would be one thing to recover too. It's just like, it's so amazing how much food prices have changed since the 1980s, where the amount for meat and dairy have actually decreased, or they've stayed the same, but fruits and vegetables have increased, at least nationally. And that's because we, as a national focus on policy, and I think that's ultimately what we're talking about here today, it focuses on our commodity crops. And there are lots of reasons why we grow commodity crops. But if we put more incentives around growing fruits and vegetables, then we could make fruits and vegetables more financially accessible. And so that's, you know, in terms of, you know, solar cooking, you know, there's that stretch, but if we think about it globally too, you know, if we're talking about, you know, changes and shifts in policy, or changes and shifts on a bigger system, so that, you know, if we have solar cookers and girls are able to not have to hunt for firewood all day, they can have educations, you know, and that we're affecting the economic system in the long term. So
you sold me right there. If girls don't have to get firewood,
right. And those are two different scales. Like the U.S. is very different than like the global poor. But yes, these are big changes that can happen.
In the U.S., people can spend like a lower income family in the United States can spend 70% of their income on heating, right? Like heating and cooking fuel. So, you know, same thing.
Wow.
You just don't have to go drag sticks around, but you still have to work really hard to pay for just basic heating and cooking fuel.
What is your take on, I know there've been the number of people and different partners and different sectors trying to resolve this issue about hunger and food insecurity around the world. And, you know, reducing food waste is definitely one way to go about it. And then there are others who say, oh, we just need to think about the way what we are producing. So bringing technology, GMOs, lab processed or lab made meats. What are your thoughts on these innovations like GMOs and lab meats, and as a solution to addressing hunger? And are they really sustainable?
I can answer this, but I would love to hear Dr. Whitney's, because I know that she does a fantastic thing on usually around Halloween on GMOs, if I remember this correctly.
So I think there's a big difference between GMOs and lab meat. The lab meat is sort of like algae cooking, right? They're like working with plants to try to make something that tastes good. And I don't actually think that that's necessarily a bad way to go. I'm not in favor of a lot of additives, so we'll have to sort of wait and see what happens. But mostly, I believe that the lab meat isn't really meat. It's just kind of, well, they want it to taste like it. It's so people taste and feel like it. And there are some where they just want to grow it on a slab, so pink stuff. We won't go there. But the GMO part, I think, is really sort of a problem, because true GMO genetically modified organisms are modified in ways that don't make any sense, like strawberries that have flounder genes in them so that they can be frozen. Like that's actually true. So that, I think, is really messing with things. I think it's one thing to sort of, you know, like hybridize plants and vegetables to get more production. It's another thing to say our strawberries can't be shipped. We're going to give them flounder genes so that they have the same resistance to cold temperatures that a fish does. I think the problem there is that we don't, when you start moving genetics in and out of things, we can cause problems that we don't know. I mean, we're actually suffering from this right now, right? Like a virus jumped to a different species, and now we're doing this virtually instead of in person, and you know, and so I think that possibility actually exists in GMOs to make some really terrible mistakes through not being well informed.
And can I just kind of piggyback on this? Only because, and I agree absolutely with everything what Dr. Whitney says. And I think there's a difference between, lab meats, and GMOs, or versus what solar cooking or these things is that instead of working with nature, it's kind of reinventing. And so this is the American problem that we just have this thing where we think that technology and innovation will solve our problems, when really we need to change behaviors and attitudes and values. So, our value system creates a system of consumerism, and the other thing too is that we think about these innovations, who are they benefiting? Mm-hmm. And we see this example in golden rice, which, there was some more in reports that came out, in, I think, August. And they, for the most part, they profit, the companies profit without the people. So when we put technology into the hands of people like solar cookers, then that is a technology that will benefit all. Whereas GMOs, benefits just a small few. And that really is getting at our root causes of food insecurity and inequity. It's creating those divisions or exasperating them.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Is this a problem? Is it a U.S. problem, or do you see these GMOs, has it gone beyond U.S. into other nations? Is that?
Yes, I mean, but for the most part, these are American companies. But at this point, I mean, they may have started out as American companies, but now there are these transnational companies, and with our seeds of globalization, where, these technologies are benefiting that global corporate without, so it is a U.S., but it's mostly, it's that difference between the global corporate versus the people who actually work the land or feed people.
Mm-hmm. Where do you see there's been the issue around climate change and how to resolve it, and pollution and all that? There's been this group of individuals who feel that this is a problem that comes from the West. They are producing the most, consumerism, they are polluting the most, and should take the major role in resolving these problems. So here's my question. What do you see has happened in terms of that view? Is this something that has been taken on, and what are the developed nations doing about it to resolve these issues that are problems that have been created? Are they taking on that responsibility and saying, yes, we did create that, we're producing the most, and so we need to play a bigger role in resolving this problem? And as we are resolving it, not causing additional problems along the way for those low-income nations. Has this been, what's been what have they this perspective? Have they embraced it? Have they, what are they thinking? What do you think?
I don't know if embraced is the right word, but but yes, I think some countries are more aware than others. I think the United States right now is very inwardly focused and blind to everything going on. Some of this I put down to trauma, literally, and we sort of turned in ourselves, and now we're just chewing ourselves up. But other countries are looking out. There's something that is actually designed to help this. The Clean Development Mechanism of the UN is actually specifically for this. Right, it is actually a program by which a large developed polluting country can underwrite technological innovation, and in another country that could not necessarily afford that and is not responsible for the pollution in the first place. Mm-hmm. So that's the purpose of the Clean Development Mechanism. Sometimes it works better than other times. Some projects are at the beginning were sort of poorly conceived, but now they have a little bit tighter grasp on how a project can get approved for this. Mm-hmm. And that's part of the whole underpinnings of the carbon market, is the Clean Development Mechanism. And I don't know, Caitlyn might be able to talk more about this. I think you guys, are you part of it?
Solar Cookers International isn't specifically, but it's definitely something we've had collaborators be a part of or a part of, and I think it's complicated as most of these things are. I mean, we definitely encourage, to your earlier question, you know, we encourage all countries to include solar cooking in their nationally determined contributions because the sun reaches all of us. So I think that's something that we can all do. I think we'll see perhaps what the US's future plans in terms of the Paris Agreement is, but that's definitely something that is a notable topic when we're at the UN Climate Conference, especially, you know, advocating for, you know, global sustainability, but recognizing that our headquarters are in the US and that there's a little disconnect for that. But I think also, I think there's a lot of different ways to look at it. I mean, you know, we have 3 billion people on this planet who are still cooking over open fires. And I think not necessarily because they want to, but I think because, you know, we as a global community haven't yet made these solutions available for everybody who wants access to them. And so I think there's a lot of progress there to be made. But then I think also those of us who are advocating for these solutions around the world need to be practitioners and use the technology ourselves. So I think there's a whole bunch of different ways to look at it. But one of the things that I love about solar cooking is when I'm talking to anybody, it's a solution that any of us can implement today. You know, it's not something that requires huge amounts of infrastructure or, you know, plans to build a dam or anything like that. It's something that each of us can do practically every day. And that's, I think, the beauty behind it is it's so empowering on that personal level, and it's so freeing in building that resilience and that self-reliance and that energy independence, which I think benefits us all.
Thank you. This would be a good time for me to show my little handmade solar cooker. Can I just show you a picture? Okay, yes. I'm going to share the screen because it's screen sharing is disabled. I guess you can't. But
and I think also Caitlyn has also something to show us as well. So we'll start with Dr. Whitney.
Yeah, so I think if you can allow me to share.
Yeah, so I just need to make you, so let's see.
That. I mean, if we trust everybody in this room, you can just easily make everybody the ability to share.
How do I make everybody?
I think you go down to screen share, and then there's an advanced screen share option.
Yeah, allows.
Or screen share, advanced screen share options.
Right. Oh, and then click all participants.
Okay. Alrighty. If that works. No, maybe not.
Then I click on all participants.
Yes.
Yeah.
Advanced.
You could figure out how to do Mary, but all participants would be the fastest.
This is all.
Okay. Hold on. I'm sorry, Mary.
No, that's okay. This design I actually got from Caitlyn's site. So everything I know about how to do this came from her site.
Do I make Mary a co-host or a host? A co-host, right?
Co-host, I think. Yeah, might work. Yeah.
I think now you should be able to share.
Okay, Mary. now, all right. So let me just show real quick. I have my screen up. Wait, let me get it here. Uh-oh, maybe I don't have it anymore. Wait. Okay, let me get it. Okay. 1 minute, please. This is my cooker.
Oh wow.
That's awesome.
It is actually a Copenhagen cooker. Very simple design. It can be made with cardboard and tin foil if you wish. And I have done so. And that's a glass cookie jar from Target.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, okay. Oops. Now
how much is the cooker? What is the cost of the cooker itself?
It cost me the, oh, excuse me. I can't get it to turn off now.
You stop sharing.
Yeah, that's good. I can still hear it on my end. I can't stop it.
Okay.
Okay, there we go. So, oops. I think okay, there I'm back. So that was 4 placemats from IKEA at like about $2 each. That's a roll of Mylar gift wrap and a $6 glass cookie jar from Target.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and the little blue pot is inside of it is an enamel camp pot that I already had. I have a set of 2, and it just happened to fit in. So,
what are you able to cook in it?
pretty much anything. I can cook like anything that you would put in a crock pot or a soup pot or a stew pot will go in there and cook beautifully. It got up to today, the final temperature, it took about 4 hours, but the final temperature today was 167 degrees Fahrenheit.
Wow.
So that's enough to cook meat to safety. That's enough to cook a chicken with, you actually could put a chicken in there if you wanted to. I don't usually cook, but you can. But that is super simple technology, and I actually got it from Solar Cookers International. Yeah, like I said, I am actually Caitlyn's fangirl. All the cookers that I have actually learned about from this.
That's great.
And they're all very simple technology. That's a really effective technology. Nobody ever thinks that simple technology can be effective.
Yeah. Caitlyn, thank you so much for sharing, Dr. Whitney. How about, Caitlyn, do you have something to share with us, or just what's behind you?
Yeah, do you want me to explain a little bit about these?
Yes.
All right, so behind me, this is the Cook It. So it's another very simple solar cooker design. This is something that Solar Cookers International designed by request of the United Nations because they wanted something that could be made easily and affordably anywhere around the world. And we made the plans open source. Thank you, Dr. Whitney, for pointing that out, as well as many others. So you can go to, we have 2 websites, solarcookers.org and solarcooking.org. And that plan, as well as many others, are open source. And I'm actually super excited to see your cookie jar as a greenhouse, because we have used Pyrex bowls too, kind of, inverted on top of each other, or you can use a plastic bag that is designed for higher temperatures, like to roast a turkey in, and you can use that as your greenhouse. Obviously, we like the more sustainable options, like a cookie jar or Pyrex bowls, but I also understand harder to transport or more breakable. So, and then this is a retained heat basket. So it's an insulated basket, and it's a really great complementary technology to solar cookers, which, thank you all for pointing out, are a very appropriate technology, which is why I love them when we're talking about, making things accessible to 3 billion people. So retained heat basket, it's like a thermos, it keeps things warm, and it's a great complement to solar cooking because, as a retort to that, well, what happens when the sun goes down? Well, you can put your food in a retained heat basket and it stays warm till whenever you want to eat it. So also you could use a beach towel and wrap something to keep it warm. It doesn't have to be fancy, but it's that same basic principle. But we also have, I don't have one with me right now, but we have water pasteurization indicators. So a basic thermometer that you can use if you're heating water in order to make it safe to drink. And that way it's just colored wax that melts at the temperature you need to heat the water to. So you can know when your water is safe to drink or if it needs to be out in the sun longer. And that's another appropriate technology. You don't need to be literate to use it. We have collaborators who are making them in Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda. Yeah, again, those complementary technologies.
Wow, that's great to know. It's amazing to hear all these. It seems quite affordable technology that can really help not only feed the world, but do it sustainably. So thank you for sharing. So I want to thank the discussion panel panelists for sharing with us. It's really interesting. It's invigorating. So I'm excited about the information I'm learning in this discussion. We do have some questions from the attendees as well. And I'm going to start with the first question from Jordan. She says, while sustainability looks different to different areas of the world, is it possible to give the term sustainable an overall encompassing definition that everyone can feel connected to?
Oh, that's all me. So, right, it does have to do with that it needs to, that sustainability means it must go on for generations. And part of that is that it has to have the economic component, the equity, the social justice component as well as the environment. If we forget any one of those three legs, then the whole thing comes toppling down. So where we could pay attention to just environmental impacts, that's not addressing labor injustice, our meat packers, especially during COVID, our farmers, and similarly in terms of social justice, that we have to think about access and equity as part of it.
Thank you. Then our next question comes from Shabnab, I believe, and she asks, how can waste of food be included in educating others about sustainability?
Well, I'm not sure. Could you say that one more time?
How can waste of food be included in educating others about sustainability?
I can do that. I can also let Mary do that if you'd rather. Yeah. I hate to be the only one talking, but
Mary could take that one.
Okay. So probably, I think it's really hard to get people to think about wasting food in the personal, and it is very easy to get them to think about it in the abstract. So like you can get everyone on the same page that wasting food is a bad idea, but then if you try to challenge someone to have a completely waste-free meal, they're actually very rarely able to do it. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that we've been trying to do is to, like in my work as a sustainability director, is actually to give people the tools to do it. So you can, teach them how to solar cook. You could also teach them how to, preserve the food so that it doesn't have to be thrown away. There's so much that gets thrown away. It's sometimes in the preparation. Like I myself had to throw stuff away today. I dropped half the tofu that I was cooking. But that's what my compost pile is for. And we do actually teach people that if you are going to waste food, composting it is just a way to essentially redeem yourself and your actions, because you're not wasting it then. You're actually, it's a carbon sink, and it's actually promoting healthy soil. So, but it is really, it's one of those ones that it's like, big picture, like, oh, nobody should ever waste food. Small picture, oh my God, I had to throw that out.
Right. And this is why we also too, we need to think about, integrating all of those different levels, so, it would be great, I don't have chickens right now, but I have in the past in Pittsburgh, where I could give give that tofu to the chickens, or even farms, thinking about farms have always been integrated in terms of livestock and produce. And so this is a really great, I think, way is thinking about, the systemic, thinking about how to deal with this in a broader sense.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Tim Barnes, and he says, when attempting to create a sustainable food system, how do you ensure that the sustainability is long-term? Also, how do you ensure that the local population are able to sustain the system themselves without the help of others? And you may have touched on this as you were discussing, but you might want to, just clarify some of this for him again.
This is an excellent question. I really think so. The thing is with all of this is that it's with the world, the system is changing. And what we know about systems is that they oscillate. The idea is instead of oscillating from really far away to get it down to a minimum. So you are always going to have some kind of change into that. So in terms of, long term, you can't develop one system. You have to, constantly address it, to think about the outcomes of what's happening. So that's really important. How do we create a culture of assessment? How do we create a culture of change and embracing it? In terms of, ensuring the local population are able to sustain themselves, I think that's purely that's the equity piece. If, it doesn't matter if it's on a US level or a global level, we have to give ownership to people, to the stakeholders. And it could be, a rural girl in Kenya, the means to create a solar cooker, or, someone to the power to make a change in their local food system here in Virginia. It's how do we address those issues of equity, and that is the undercurrent, I think, of a lot of our discussion today, but also what we're happening in the U.S. At the moment.
So I want to take this opportunity to thank our panelists. This has been an eye-opening discussion. It has been an interesting discussion, and I'm sure we could go on for the next 1 hour or 2 hours or so if we had the time. And so thank you so much. I also want to take the time to thank those in attendance, our students, and the GME community as a whole who are part of this. This will be aired as part of Star Tides. So Star Tides again is on next week, October 20th and 21st. I invite everybody, welcome to be, come in and listen to the other sessions as well that are gonna be part of the Star Tides breakout sessions. So I wanna say, have a good evening, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Gewa.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. You were great.
Yeah.
This is very fun.
Opportunity.
I know.
Bye.
Bye.